Roman records detail women's breasts cut off in public squares. Nobody flinched. Executioners kept trophies. Judges bragged about their cruelty, and crowds went home proud. Victims' names vanished, but the scars stayed for centuries. What was the sickest punishment Rome ever invented? Let's break it down in the 20 most horrific torture methods used on women in ancient Rome. It's worse than you think. Let's start with number 20. Breast amputation. Roman law allowed extreme mutilation for slaves and non-citizens, and women in those groups had almost no protection. Breast amputation appears in late Roman persecution accounts as punishment tied to sexual refusal and religious defiance. Around 251 CE, during the Decian persecution, sources describe Agatha of Sicily having her breasts cut off after rejecting a Roman official. Historians treat the story as hagiography, yet they agree the method fits documented Roman patterns of gendered violence. Why target breasts? In Roman culture, breasts represented motherhood, nourishment, and sexual worth. Removing them attacked status, fertility, and identity at once. Officials understood symbolism. A wounded body taught lessons faster than laws ever could. Survival created lifelong damage. Medical writers note high risk of infection, blood loss, and chronic pain. Social damage followed. Disfigurement reduced marriage prospects and community standing, especially in honor-based cities. A woman carried the punishment daily, long after crowds left. This punishment also worked publicly. It told spectators that refusing male authority had visible consequences. Rome ruled through examples, not explanations. Here is the uncomfortable truth. This method was not random cruelty. It was state messaging carved into flesh. If a woman controlled her body, the state reclaimed it. Here comes number 19. Tongue removal. Roman courts relied on torture, and women without status paid the price. Legal texts from the 1st and 2nd centuries describe quaestio per tormenta, interrogation through pain, used mainly on slaves. Women questioned under torture had no right to silence. Their bodies became tools for evidence. Actual tongue removal rarely appears in formal court records, but cultural evidence fills the gap. Roman stories repeatedly punish women who speak too freely. The myth of Philomela, whose tongue was cut out to stop her accusation, shaped how Romans imagined justice. Speech from women felt dangerous. Training manuals for elite students included mock trials arguing a woman should be tortured until she says what judges expect. That detail matters. It shows how normal forced speech felt to Roman thinkers. Removing a tongue destroyed more than sound. It erased testimony, reputation, and legal presence. A woman without speech could not accuse, defend, or negotiate. Survival meant lifelong dependence and isolation. This punishment solved two problems at once. It stopped unwanted words and warned others to stay quiet. Control mattered more than truth. Once speech disappeared, Rome focused on another sense that shaped independence: sight. And the results stayed visible forever. That change reshaped lives. Let's move to number 18. Eye gouging. Roman punishment valued lasting reminders over quick deaths. Blinding delivered that perfectly. Later persecution accounts describe women having eyes destroyed during public torture, especially in religious cases. One of the best known is Lucy of Syracuse, traditionally dated to the early 4th century under Diocletian. Different versions exist, but all agree blindness defined her fate. Some say officials gouged out her eyes. Others say torture caused the damage. Either way, the result mattered more than the method. A blind survivor carried the sentence everywhere. For Roman women, sight meant independence. It allowed work, movement, and social interaction. Losing it forced dependence on family or owners. That dependency reduced marriage options and economic survival. Blinding punished the future, not just the moment. Scholars studying martyr accounts notice a pattern. Female bodies are attacked at the face, eyes, and chest far more often than male bodies. These areas held social value tied to beauty and honor. Damaging them changed how a woman existed in public. Blinding also avoided immediate death. Officials could punish, display, and release a victim to spread fear daily. The state erased vision so everyone else would remember obedience. Once sight was gone, Rome turned to methods of breaking bodies. Next one is number 17. Breaking on the wheel. Public execution in Rome aimed for visibility, noise, and time. Breaking bones delivered all three. Although the classic breaking wheel belongs to medieval Europe, Roman punishment already included bone-crushing methods using carts, beams, and frames. Bodies were stretched across wooden structures and struck repeatedly. Ancient descriptions emphasize delayed death rather than efficiency. Broken legs and ribs produced screams, collapse, and obvious deformity. That spectacle mattered more than speed. Women faced these punishments when labeled rebels, poisoners, or accomplices. Status decided everything. Roman citizens enjoyed protections that slaves and provincials lacked. A woman without citizenship had almost no procedural safety once condemned. Bone damage carried lasting consequences. Survivors lived with disability, pain, and dependence. Mobility vanished. Work options shrank. Families carried the burden of care, which spread the punishment beyond the individual. Historians describe Roman execution as public education. Crowds learned through watching bodies fail. Bent limbs and shattered posture stayed visible long after death. The image followed spectators home. This method turned the skeleton into evidence. Pain, movement, and collapse became part of the sentence. Rome used the whole body to teach hierarchy. That shift made punishment impossible to ignoring. Let's move to number 16. Iron hooks. Iron hooks appear in Roman torture descriptions from the early empire. Called unci or ungulae, these tools grabbed skin, lifted bodies, or tore muscle while victims remained alive. They allowed pain to continue in stages. Christian texts describing 2nd and 3rd century persecutions mention women suspended or ripped with hooks before execution. While faith shapes these accounts, historians agree the instruments themselves were real and commonly used by Roman officials. Hooks solved practical problems. They dragged bodies through public streets, lifted victims for display, and tore flesh without killing too quickly. Executioners could pause, question, then resume. Pain came in controlled waves. For women, hooks often targeted the chest, sides, or back. These areas bled heavily and stayed visible to crowds. The goal stayed consistent. Create suffering spectators could follow step by step. Importantly, hooks kept victims alive. Death came later, after the message landed. A torn body hanging in public space forced people to watch, react, and remember. This punishment worked because it combined movement, injury, and display. One simple tool turned a person into a lesson. When tearing flesh proved effective, Rome learned weight alone could finish the job. That realization reshaped how Rome designed suffering to control everyone. If you're enjoying this story, give us hype for this video right now. Hit that subscribe button and drop a like so this series reaches every explorer out there. The next twist in this story is seconds away, and trust me, you'll want to be here when it drops. Here comes number 15. Crushing with weights. Roman punishment wasn't always sharp or bloody. Sometimes weight alone did the job. Records and archaeology show officials using heavy stones, beams, or mechanical frames to crush suspects, mainly slaves and women with no rights. The method squeezed bodies until joints popped, chests collapsed, or confessions came out. Why this approach? Rome believed pain proved guilt. Judges sometimes argued that the truth comes out under pressure, but history tells us fear worked better than accuracy. Women pinned under rocks had to answer questions while fighting to breathe. For some, it ended there. Others suffered broken bones and lifelong injuries. Medical risk was huge. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, and suffocation happened fast. The most common targets, women considered troublemakers, especially slaves accused of theft or poison. If a confession didn't arrive, the punishment kept going until there was silence. This wasn't about justice. It was about control, teaching everyone how light a life could be if the state called you worthless. Crushing was cheaper than iron, required no skill, and left marks no one could hide. This method turned weight into a weapon. Rome used gravity to show power, and to make sure pain never needed a blade. Let's move to number 14. Pitch and fire punishment. Roman rulers loved public warnings, and fire delivered the message loudest. After Rome's Great Fire in 64 CE, Emperor Nero lit his gardens with the bodies of condemned Christians, men and women. These victims were coated in pitch or oil, tied up, and burned alive as human torches. The fire wasn't just about execution. It was about making crowds remember the cost of stepping out of line. Even after Nero, burning with pitch became a punishment for arson, treason, or magical crimes. Records mention women rolled in sticky tar and set on fire in arenas or marketplaces. Burning stripped away more than life. Hair, clothing, and identity all vanished. For women, losing modesty in public was a penalty of its own. Medical writers later described the agony. Nerves fried, skin peeled off, and death came slow if the flames climbed upward. Spectators didn't forget. The smell of burning flesh stuck in everyone's mind, turning a punishment into a city-wide warning. The goal was simple: make the body itself a torch so everyone saw the cost. When the smoke cleared, Rome didn't stop with fire. The next step was hanging bodies in full view. Next one is number 13. Hanging in cages. Rome believed shame lasted longer than pain. After executions, some women found themselves hanging in iron cages or on public posts, bodies exposed for days, weeks, even longer. It wasn't just about death. It was about denying burial, which mattered deeply in Roman culture. If you were a slave or convicted criminal, hanging in a cage meant everyone saw your end.